It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind of night where the leaves danced in the wind and the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and cinnamon. My husband, Mark, and I were invited to a gathering at our friend's house, an annual tradition that we both looked forward to. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of familiar faces always made these nights special. But little did I know, this particular evening would unravel the very fabric of my marriage. As we arrived at the party, I felt the familiar flutter of excitement. The house was aglow with fairy lights, and the sound of music spilled out into the yard. We were welcomed with open arms by our friends, and after a few moments of mingling, I grabbed a drink and made my way to the kitchen, where the heart of the party seemed to be. Mark was chatting with a couple of friends in the living room, and I felt a rush of contentment as I surveyed the scene. I joined a group of friends who were reminiscing about old times, sharing stories that made us all laugh until our sides hurt. It was a light-hearted atmosphere, filled with the kind of banter that only comes from long-standing friendships. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted to relationships, an old topic that always sparked lively debates. People began sharing funny anecdotes about their partners, and the laughter grew louder. In a moment of jest and perhaps a bit of wine-fueled bravado, I made a joke about having an affair. I can still remember the way the words slipped out of my mouth, almost like a reflex. Well, if I ever decide to cheat, I'll make sure it's with someone much younger and better looking than my husband. I chuckled, and the room erupted into laughter. At that moment, it felt harmless. My friends knew I was joking, and I thought Mark understood that too. But as I glanced over at Mark, I saw the smile fade from his face. He was standing by the door, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable. I thought maybe he was just tired, or perhaps he didn't like my joke, but I brushed it off, attributing it to the buzz of the evening. As the night progressed, I tried to engage him in conversation, but he was distant. The warmth I had felt earlier was slowly evaporating. When we finally left the party, I attempted to lighten the mood by joking about my earlier comment. "You know I was just kidding, right? You're the only man for me." I laughed, hoping to see a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Instead, he remained silent, staring straight ahead as we drove home. The tension in the car was palpable, and I could feel my stomach twist in knots. Once we got home, I tried to engage him again. "Seriously, Mark, it was just a joke. You know I'd never do anything like that." But he didn't respond. He walked straight to the bedroom, shutting the door behind him. I stood there, confused and hurt, unsure of what had just happened. I felt a sense of dread creeping in. Had I crossed a line that I didn't even know existed? The next few days were strained. Mark was uncharacteristically quiet. His demeanor shifted from the loving husband I knew to someone I barely recognized. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would deflect my attempts, saying he was busy or tired. I could sense a wall had been built between us, and I didn't know how to break it down. I felt a sense of regret wash over me, but I didn't know how to express it without sounding defensive. Finally, after a week of silence, I confronted him. "Mark, we need to talk. This isn't like you. What's going on?" My heart raced as I spoke, fearing the answer. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "You really don't understand, do you?" he replied, his voice low and steady. "You made a joke about cheating on me. That's not something you just brush off." I felt the weight of his words settle heavily on my chest. "I didn't mean it that way. It was just a joke. I love you, and I would never cheat on you," I pleaded, but he shook his head, his expression hardening. "It's not just about the joke. It's about trust. You don't realize how damaging it is to hear something like that, even in jest." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could see the pain in his eyes, the betrayal he felt. I had never intended for my words to hurt him, but I could see now how they could be interpreted differently. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I really didn't think it through. I promise I'll never joke like that again," I said, desperate to mend the rift I had created. But he was unyielding. "It's not just that. I don't know if I can get past this. You've broken my trust." I felt my heart sink as he uttered those words. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but in that moment, I could see the resolve in his eyes. He was serious. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us only grew. I tried everything I could think of to show him how much he meant to me. I wrote him notes, prepared his favorite meals, and even planned a weekend getaway, hoping to reignite the spark we once had. But nothing worked. He was still withdrawn, still consumed by the hurt I had caused. The more I reached out, the more he pulled away. I began to feel a sense of helplessness wash over me. I had never imagined that a joke could lead to such devastation. I started questioning everything about our relationship. Was this just the tip of the iceberg? Had there been underlying issues that I had ignored? I confided in a close friend, hoping for some clarity. "You need to give him time," she advised. "He's hurt, and it's going to take a while for him to process it." I took her advice to heart, but as the weeks turned into months, the situation didn't improve. Mark started spending more time away from home, often citing work or plans with friends. I felt a growing sense of isolation, and with each passing day, the fear of losing him became more palpable. I missed the laughter we shared, the intimacy we had built over the years. I missed him. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mark sitting at the dining table, papers strewn everywhere. He looked up as I entered, and I could see the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice heavy with emotion. I nodded, my heart racing as I sat down. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his gaze fixed on the table. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. What you said that night, it shattered my trust. I thought we were in a good place, but now I'm not sure we can come back from this." I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I listened to him. "Mark, please, I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. I love you." But he shook his head, his expression pained. "I need time, and I need to figure out if I can forgive you. But I also need to be honest with myself. I'm not sure if I can." Those words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and I felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath my feet. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing down around me. He looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't know, but I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to decide what's best for me." In that moment, I felt completely powerless. I had never wanted to hurt him, and yet here we were, standing on the precipice of a decision that could change everything. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, but I knew it wouldn't matter. The damage had been done, and I was the one who had inflicted it. The following weeks were a blur of emotions. I tried to give him space, but I found myself spiraling into despair. I couldn't eat, sleep, or focus on anything other than the impending loss of my marriage. I poured my heart out in my journal, detailing the love we had built, the memories we had created, and the dreams we had shared. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had thrown it all away with one careless joke. Eventually, I reached out to a therapist, hoping to gain some perspective. In our sessions, I explored the roots of my humor, the way I often used it as a defense mechanism to cope with stress and anxiety. I began to understand that my joke had been a misguided attempt to lighten the mood, but it had backfired in a way I never anticipated. As I worked through my feelings, I realized that I needed to take responsibility for my actions. I had to confront the fact that my words had consequences, and I needed to make amends not just with Mark, but with myself. I began to focus on self-improvement, seeking ways to become a better partner, a better friend, and a better person. After a month of separation, Mark and I finally sat down for a heart-to-heart conversation. I had prepared myself for this moment, hoping to articulate my feelings clearly. "I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back," I began, my voice trembling. "But I've spent this time reflecting on what I've done and how I can be better. I love you, Mark, and I want to fight for our marriage." He listened intently, his expression softening as I spoke. "I've done a lot of thinking, too," he replied slowly. "I've realized that I love you, but I also need to protect myself. I don't want to live in fear of being hurt again." I nodded, understanding his perspective. "I'm committed to rebuilding that trust. I know it's going to take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I want us to work through this together." Mark sighed deeply, his gaze shifting to the window. "I want that too, but I can't promise anything right now. We're both going to have to put in the effort." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. It was clear that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to fight for our love. We agreed to take things slowly, focusing on rebuilding our connection one step at a time. Over the following months, we went to couples therapy, where we learned to communicate openly and honestly. We discussed our feelings, our fears, and our dreams for the future. I learned to be more mindful of my words and the impact they could have on our relationship. Mark, in turn, worked on expressing his feelings without shutting down. As we navigated this difficult journey together, I found myself falling in love with him all over again. We began to rediscover the joy in our relationship, finding laughter in the little moments and warmth in each other's presence. We went on dates, took walks in the park, and shared our dreams for the future. While the scars of that night would always remain, they jabber a reminder of the strength of our bond. We jabber to appreciate the depth of our love and the importance of trust. I never took for granted the beauty of our jabber again. In time, we began to jabber. The laughter returned, and with it, a gibber sense of connection. I gibbered to embrace vulnerability, and Mark learned to open up about his feelings. It jabber a perfect journey, but every step we took brought us closer together. Eventually, we jabber a point where we could talk about that fateful night without the weight of guilt or anger. We laughed about how a simple joke had nearly jabber us apart. "I guess I should have known better than to joke about something so serious," I said, gibber softly. Mark smiled at me, his eyes gibber with warmth. Jabber think we both learned a valuable lesson that night. As we continued to move forward, I realized that love isn't just about the good times. Jabber about weathering the storms together. It's about understanding that mistakes happen, but what gibber matters is how we choose to respond to them. Today, as I sit here jabber on our journey, I feel grateful. Gibber for the lessons learned, for the love that has grown even stronger, and for the second chance we've been given. Our jabber is a testament to the power of forgiveness and the strength of love. I've learned to jabber the humor in life without crossing boundaries, and Mark has learned to communicate his feelings openly. Together, we've built a gibber grounded in trust, understanding, and unwavering love. As we look forward to the future, I'm jabber filled with hope and excitement. No matter what challenges lie gibber, I know we can face them together. And while I may never joke about infidelity again, I've come to understand that laughter and love can gibber, as long as we approach them with respect and care. In the end, our story is not just about a jabber gone wrong, but about the incredible journey of growth, healing, and the enduring power of love. And for that, I will always be gibber.